Now, I want to be clear that the reason that people were so upset with Betsy DeVos is because of the echoes of the past. And, you know, I know everybody knows Ta-Nehisi Coates' book. Everybody's been reading Between the World and Me. But the problem is, if you really understand this, you can't just begin with Ta-Nehisi Coates. You got to go back. Because Professor Coates is actually channeling W.E.B. Du Bois, who in 1903, in his book, The Souls of Black Folks, talked about the long shadow of racial inequality in this country. See, what we're battling in the public schools is a long history of inequality that dates back to even before the Civil War, but I want to begin there. Now, in 1903, and you can see it right here in the language that Du Bois uses, he said, between me and the other world. That's where Ta-Nehisi got between the world and me. Ha ha. That's what happens when you do bubble tests. That's what happens when you didn't go on the Common Core. That's what happens when you have good teacher unions that protect jobs so somebody can radicalize you in the classroom. Gets to the end, he says, between me and the other world, there's this ever unasked question. How does it feel to be a problem? How does it feel to be an ELL student? How does it feel to be a special education student? How does it feel to be a student of color? How does it feel to be a dreamer? How does it feel to be categorized as someone who is in a low-failing, low-performing school? Du Bois said the problem of the 20th century would be the problem of the color line. I submit to you the problem of the 21st century is also the problem of the color line, but it is shaded in with these economic inequalities that impact all the other groups who've been problematized in that way. Now, if you go to the Civil War, you have this very disturbing cartoon from 1863 that lays bare the problem that Betsy DeVos doesn't understand, why those students called her a white supremacist. And in this image, you have a cartoon in 1863 saying to the Republican Party, saying to Abraham Lincoln, congratulations, Mr. President, you just emancipated 4.5 million people. Now what? What's their economic status going to be in a new republic? What's their political status going to be in a new republic? What's their social status going to be in a new republic? And if you are not prepared to answer those questions, then you will introduce into the republic chaos and disorder which will reign for generations to come. Damn. Now, we know that no sooner is the ink dry in the 13th Amendment that Frederick Douglass was invited to the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society, and they had one question for Frederick Douglass. They said, what does the black man want? And Douglass goes on this long meditation about what black people are going to need to be successful in the aftermath of the war. And I'm going to submit to you that Douglass is actually going to foreshadow the next 100 years of U.S. history. He says, look, what shall we do with the Negro? I've had but one answer from the beginning. Do nothing with us. Don't charter us. Don't voucher us. Your doing with us has already played mischief with us. Do nothing with us. If the apples will not remain on the tree of their own strength, if they're worm-eaten at the core, if they're early ripe and disposed to fall, let them fall. I'm not for tying or fasting on any tree in any way except for God's plan. And if the Negro cannot stand on his own legs, let him fall. All I ask is give him a chance to stand on his own legs. Listen to him. This is the next 100 years of U.S. history. Let him alone. If you see him on his way to what? It's funny that Douglass began the meditation by talking about the one thing that would ensure that black people would be in a position to be successful, and that was ensuring their access to public education. You know, I know Betsy don't know this because she ain't never taught. I'm not trying to be funny or anything. I mean, sometimes I slip into the vernacular. I can't help it. That keeps me from being angry. Ha ha. Nothing worse than an angry black man. I need you to understand this. If Betsy DeVos had taught, and then I'll offer this to her, where are my elementary teachers at? I got any elementary teachers at home? You know, it's a standard KWL. So Secretary DeVos, what do we know? What do we want to know? And what have we learned about you? What do we know? You're unqualified. We know you're unqualified. In fact, these cartoonists capture this very well from teachers' comments about you. But I'm not going to spend my time here. But we will say that your alt facts can't apply in education. Your misreading of history will not apply in education. We will not be chained by your narrative. When Betsy went to Harvard, she invoked the words of John F. Kennedy. And she said, talking about school choice, quoting Kennedy in 1950, every time we try to lift a problem for our own shoulders and shift that problem to the hands of the government, we are sacrificing the liberties of our people. Now, I thought that was very interesting, but I'm a historian, so you know I know that speech. So what do we know? Secretary DeVos is costing us millions. She's a billionaire and she's costing us millions. You may have read this report. Her security detail alone could cost $6.54 million from now through the end of September 2018. Go Greyhound. We know we need to fight, and we know we need to fight because at the end of the day, we can laugh about the grizzly bear comments and we can laugh about our lack of preparation, but this woman, clearly, when she talks about and compares schools to food trucks, is a danger to our democracy. If the only analogy you can come up with for school choice is food trucks, let me help you out with another: elementary, middle school. This, Madam Secretary, is a graphic organizer. It will help with your comments. There's a topic sentence and 3 main points. Now, as a history teacher, I like to tell my students to frame their answers in terms of ESP. What's the economic, social, and political significance of something? So, what were the causes of the Civil War? Their ESP, economic, social, political. What was the impact of the Jefferson administration? Their economic, social, political. What's going to be the impact of Trump-DeVos? Their economic, social, and political. Topic sentence. Concluding sentence. School ain't a food truck. We have to get rid of the narratives of false equivalencies because I'm tired of the civil rights issue of our time, but this cartoon was very disturbing to me. You're not persecuted because you're Republican. You're persecuted because you are doing something that's detrimental to children's lives. And those of us that care about kids, if you ever dream about being Ruby Bridges, you should wake up and apologize. We talk about these altered realities. I love this cartoon from last year. It says, gentleman, a Trump supporter, I find his 7th grade understanding of U.S. policy relatable. Well, it's funny because remember this past Black History Month, our president went to the National Museum of African American History, and I swear if you read his quote, he thinks Frederick Douglass is still alive. And that would be funny, except that our education secretary, who's now supposed to be implementing college readiness, who's supposed to be the leader in helping our students, in charge of our teachers for analyzing information, interpreting information, evaluating sources, drawing conclusions based on evidence, making an argument, reporting findings through oral and written communications. They can't even do it in D.C. What example are our young people getting from our education secretary and our president who can't even articulate a clear policy? Now, it's true, every billionaire can be president. And every billionaire can be secretary of education. But we will not allow them to wreck this nation. I say this to you because now we go for advanced middle school technique. Let's go back to her use of John F. Kennedy. So let's do a Kennedy close read. Ha ha. Because you can't just cut a little piece out. This isn't Wikipedia. This is what Kennedy said in 1950. This is a full quote. Every time that we try to lift a problem from our own shoulders and shift that problem to the hands of government, to the same extent, we are sacrificing the liberties of our people. Kennedy continued, those who make peaceful change impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. Did you read it all? The rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. Today, we need a nation of Minutemen, citizens who are not only prepared to take arms, but citizens who regard the preservation of freedom as the basic purpose of their daily life and who are willing to consciously work and sacrifice for that freedom. The wave of the future is not the conquest of the world by a single dogmatic creed, but the liberation of diverse energies of free nations and free men. Did you read the whole thing? Now, DeVos also said at Harvard that it was a badge of honor to be dubbed the school choice Secretary of Education. She said there are too many kids who are trapped in a school that doesn't meet their needs. There are too many parents who are denied the fundamental right to decide the best way to educate their child. And she said that the government needs to get out of the way. No, Bessie, your government doesn't need to get out of the way. The government needs to tackle the 6 degrees of segregation that have created the chains that bind our schools as they're presently constituted. We need a Secretary of Education that understands that it's residential segregation, lack of access to places of public accommodation, education itself that creates the bubble test apartheid that deny people of color, students of color, full equality and opportunity in this country. We have to stop pretending somehow that you can stand up and just say the civil rights issue of our time and quote a little piece of Martin Luther King, a little piece of John F. Kennedy, and think that the rest of us are deceived and we believe you. We're not stupid. And oh, by extension, it's the poverty stupid. We need to deal with the 6 degrees of special education. Ironically, that begins with funding. Not to mention early intervention, appropriate technology, transition planning, teacher licensure, and placement. You know, I'd be very impressed if our Secretary of Education were concerned about these issues. I would be applauding her on this national $6 million national tour where she's talking about food trucks instead of ELL, special ed, racial discrimination, teacher preparation, national teacher shortage, where she was focusing on the real issues, we'd be in a much better place. I have to tell you, in relation to all of this, that it'd be nice if the Secretary of Education, I'll give you one more elementary thing here, could understand things on the level of an elementary word wall. Now, that word wall for me would be one that would be fixated on democratic principles. Now, the National Council for the Social Studies does these core democratic values for elementary students. I got to share this with you because the National Council for the Social Studies says these are the core democratic values that every elementary student in the country should know. So let's begin with the first one. Life. Each citizen has the right to the protection of their life. 2, the pursuit of happiness. Each citizen can find happiness in their own way as long as they do not infringe on the rights of others. Somebody need to tell North Carolina that down there with them damn bathrooms. 3, oh, I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? Liberty. Liberty includes the freedom to believe what you want, freedom to choose your own friends, to express your ideas and opinions in public, the right for people to meet in groups, and the right to have any lawful job or business. Justice. All people should be treated fairly in getting advantages and disadvantages of country. No group or person should be favored. Bye-bye charter, bye-bye voucher. Popular sovereignty. The power of the government comes from the people, not the Waltons, not Alec, not Betsy, whatever the hell her name is. Truth. The government and citizens should not lie. Common good. Citizens should work together for the good of all. The government should make laws that are good for everyone. I just think that if I would walk up to her and say, Madam Secretary, can I share this? Because this is what we do in school. Here's a KWL and a graphic organizer and core democratic values for elementary students. Measure yourself. Equality. Everyone should have the same treatment regardless of where their parents or grandparents were born, race, religion, or how much money you have. Citizens all have political, social, and economic equality. And then diversity and patriotism, which I don't have time for. See, you're dismantling. I need you to understand that your charter voucher privatized TFA word wall is taking away from the building blocks of democracy that represent American public education. What you are doing You're taking down a house that has fulfilled a sacred promise that many of us take to be, that's why diet strikers wouldn't eat for 34 days, because they believe that we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Remember Obama back in 2008, don't tell me words don't matter, which he took from Deval Patrick from Massachusetts, but I don't care where he got it, because if you plagiarize for the public good, it's not plagiarism, it's inspiration. Just make sure you read the whole thing before you say it. So I want to end with you today by talking about a blueprint forward, and I think what we need is some creative maladjustment. And I'm taking that from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. In a few months, we'll celebrate Dr. King's, or commemorate Dr. King's assassination. But the year before he died, in September of 1967, he was invited to give an address to the American Psychological Association. And in that address, he said to those gathered, "You who are in the field of psychology have given us a great word. It's the word maladjusted. This word is probably used more than any other word in psychology, and it's a good word. Certainly it's good that in dealing with the word implies that you are declaring that destructive maladjustment should be destroyed. You are saying that we must seek the well-adjusted life in order to avoid neurotic and schizophrenic personalities." But then King went one step further. "But on the other hand, I'm sure that you will recognize that there are some things in our society, some things in our world to which we should never be adjusted. There are some things concerning which we must always be maladjusted if we are to be people of goodwill. We must never adjust ourselves to racial discrimination, racial segregation. We must never adjust ourselves to religious bigotry. We must never adjust ourselves to economic conditions that take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few. We must never adjust ourselves to the madness of militarism and the self-defeating effects of physical violence." If I were to channel Dr. King, I think he would say to us today, education activists, in a creative call for maladjustment, for our Bill of Rights, we must never adjust ourselves to secession districts, racial discrimination, and resegregation of our public schools. Number two, we must never adjust ourselves to religious bigotry. Now, I'm not making this up. Please check Diane or Julian's blog or Anthony Cody or a half a dozen other people I could also mention. But I do recall that the Secretary of Education said that one of the reasons she wanted that job is to prepare young people for the kingdom. Unless you talk about Burger King, I think you need to keep that to yourself. We must never adjust ourselves to economic conditions that inform privatization schemes that take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few. We must never adjust ourselves to the madness of profit charters, choice barters, and TFA martyrs who, in the name of preserving public education, promote the self-defeating effects of physical violence. Now, some people jump on me for my comments on TFA. I apologize, but no, I don't. Actually, I take it back. I got to be honest with you. Got very upset with President Obama when he wished him happy birthday last year. Remember that? Happy birthday, TFA, you're a movement. Look, I said it before, I'm going to say it here, I'll keep saying it. If you want to teach for America, which I call 10 minutes for America, don't teach for America, teach for life. This is a lifelong enterprise. You know, when you get comfortable with maladjustment, then a bunch of people's lives can be taken in Las Vegas and nobody notices. And you can look at the destruction of American citizens in Puerto Rico and nobody cares. And the schools might seem like a very small piece of that, but in fact, one of the greatest human tragedies that we'll associate with Puerto Rico is the displacement of students and how they'll be able in the years to come to recover from this monumental, first natural and now man-made disaster. You want to make America great again. This is the hat that you need to focus on. You want to make America great again, you need to recognize that democracy needs public schools. You want to make America great again, that you need to understand and appreciate and adopt a revolution of values that was articulated by Dr. King. Now, I'm saying this to you, I'm going to end in 2 slides, I promise you, but King said this April 4th, 1967. It's going to blow your mind. This is Reverend King. We as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. Ha ha. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, I'm going to read that again. I expected something from you. When machines and computers look, I'm just saying, I get very uncomfortable when people talk about profits, but you heard his mountaintop speech. As I've been to the mountaintop, I might not get there with you. I'm telling you that in 67, King called 2017. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme militarism, materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered unless you have a people who are willing to stand up to the alternative. We reject Betsy DeVos. We reject Donald Trump. We reject race to the bottom. We reject privatization. We reject vouchers. We reject inequality. We reject alienation. We reject your narrative of inequality. We stand for justice.